So the bitter lesson, like what is it? Basically, it just means that whenever you encode human knowledge into something, you're going to be outperformed by AI in the long term. And so it's originally from a paper by this guy named Rich Sutton from the University of Texas at Austin. Let me just pull it up actually, and we can just kind of chat through it.
Yeah, and this came out a while ago, right? When
Yeah,
did you write this?
this came out,
It's like pre the huge AI bubble, right?
yeah, March 13th, 2019. So
Okay,
that was
yeah.
like, when was GPT-3 released? Was that
Yeah,
2022? November
I
of
think it was
2022?
before. Yeah, that's I don't even know if GPT-2 was out.
Yeah, this was like super early. It is so crazy that we're only 3 years into the
It
whole
is. It's felt like
AI
a long time.
boom. Uh, yeah, I mean, basically, what this means is that he gives this background and it kind of talks about the background of AI research, and that over the past 70 years, what we've seen is that anytime we start to encode human knowledge into something, it basically just gets outpaced by AI. It's kind of, he says that the reason for it is Moore's Law, which I think is kind of interesting. Maybe this is a hot take because I think of Moore's Law in a different way, but he says that because of Moore's Law, we can basically anticipate that AI is going to get better, computation is going to get better. So if we encode any sort of human knowledge or process into a task, we're going to be outperformed in the long run. I don't know, Bridger. I feel like you and I have run into this. It's interesting because like there was not a name for it. Well, we didn't think of a name for it until like we heard of the bitter lesson. But it's like after we heard the bitter lesson, we're like, oh yeah, this is what we've been
Yeah.
facing.
Yeah, totally. Like I think as you start building like systems for AI and like using AI, it's easy to kind of like treat it as like a general like a basic software, like a basic SaaS, like and kind of think about it the same way. Whereas it's almost like you're working more with like a human than just like code at this point, like with especially with where AI has gone to today. And so you almost it's like when you're working with other people or training up new hires, you want to kind of create like a good environment and a good system for them to do their best work and not necessarily just like hold their hand or force them to follow certain steps. And so I think like this whole concept was really ahead of its time because it's like every week, every 2 weeks, there's a new model that's better than the last model. And so,
Yeah,
like, why shouldn't we build systems where it's like we just replace basically the newest model and then it can just run the whole thing?
yeah. It's so interesting because this space moves so fast
Hmm.
that something you build 1 minute is going to be outdated the next.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of scary, but at the same time, it's like kind of exciting. And I think we've seen this where at first, when people were building GPT wrappers, people would always joke that like OpenAI would release a feature and then it would just completely Sherlock the old business and they'd be out of business. But we've almost seen the opposite where GPT releases something, or maybe OpenAI releases a new model, Anthropic releases a new model, or Google now releases a new model. Their business isn't all of a sudden obsolete. It's like
Hmm.
if you were a good GPT wrapper, then you can just swap out the model and then the business value is still the same. Um, but I feel like a mistake that we made early on was we kind of treated these LLMs like children, like
Hmm.
really, really, like honestly, children were better at doing tasks, than like some of these models in the early stages. So it could do something like pretty well, but you had to like build so many guardrails. It was like we're going to build this like really deterministic workflow to use these models in a certain way, and then like it was a lot of like if this then this.
Yeah.
But then the model would get better, and then suddenly we wouldn't have to do that, and it's like we have all this legacy code all of a sudden that's like completely obsolete. It's I feel like it's a tough mindset shift, especially for us because we like I think for anyone that like learned how to code before AI, it's like hard because you're so used to just like building this
Yeah.
structure into a code base, but then now it's almost like you don't need it as much. You can
Hmm.
kind of just rely more on this like intelligent LLM to do all of the reasoning for you, and not have to like worry about the orchestration. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's like for me, it's fundamentally changed like how I think about building like software, because it's almost like you're building systems for like, you have like a user, obviously like the end user, but you also have like an AI that you're also building it for. So you want to make sure like the data is available. You want to make sure like the AI can build things within your application, and like you kind of build like these endpoints or tools that are just dedicated to like using AI within your system. And I think like that will open a lot of opportunity. If you can like build that way and think that way, that's a lot of opportunity for like kind of like upending some of these like traditional software companies that maybe, it's like they didn't build their system that way. Like something we're building now, like we've completely built it from like an AI first perspective, which means like AI is doing the bulk of the work within our software. And like I feel like that did change like the way we thought about like crafting like the system and like what that looks like, and then how, and then it brings a whole nother challenge that we can maybe talk about in a later episode, but of like how does the user interface work then for
Yeah.
that, for a user who's maybe not like as much clicking buttons as they are just like prompting.
Yeah, totally. And I think like we almost have to treat it, and we've been treating it in this new code base like an intern in a way, where you, if you're working with like a junior
Mm-hmm.
developer, and we've both like had this in the past, where you have to build like if you're building a new system, you know that you have to build it in a way that someone else can contribute to it, and then they
Mm-hmm.
can get into it and easily know what to do. And I feel like it's the same thing with AI, and we're kind of becoming more, I guess, hyper aware of like the things that we have to do to be able to make AI more able to contribute to a code base. I feel like an intern or a person might be able to kind of like, you can throw a code base at someone and then they can stare at it for a few hours and kind of start to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
AI can do the same thing, but it's like it's just so eager to start making changes that I feel like the changes won't be very good. So we've kind of started to like build, I want to say guardrails. Guardrails is not the right word, because like I think the bitter lessons tells us that we shouldn't make guardrails if
Yeah.
possible. But I think like the key lesson for me is as a engineer that's working with AI and these systems every day is from the bitter lesson is that we should kind of prioritize these like scalable methods over like embedding domain specific knowledge into the workflow or into the application. And I think it's like way harder to do that than to just like, put
Yeah.
down what's in your mind into the application. I feel
Yeah,
like that's been a
totally.
huge mindset shift.
Yeah, and like I do feel like that's kind of like the future of software development, like because it is like, yeah, like we learned to code pre like the AI boom, and so it's like we kind of learned like how humans should learn to code. It's like
Yeah.
with our weaknesses and with the things that we're good at and things like that, where it's like now it's like we've become more, it's like everyone's like a product manager that's a developer now, and so it's like it is a whole different like mindset that you need to have, and like a whole different shift. And it's like I feel like it's been comparable to as well to like managing people, like
Hmm.
it I've like used like skills I've learned from like management books to like kind of like work with AI and like just kind of get it to like work within the system that I've kind of developed for it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's such a good point. We kind of almost have to like relearn what we're doing. I think that one of the trends that people talk about with AI is this idea that we're going to start offloading cognition to
Yeah.
AI, like offload our thinking. I think that could happen in some terms, especially with like, you see this happen maybe with art or writing, where there are shortcuts, but to build like a really scalable system, it almost takes more mental capacity to be able to think of it at a high level and think about all these edge cases and then be able to make it so that AI can contribute to it.
Yeah.
It's like more cognitively challenging, in my opinion, than
Yeah.
before.
No, totally. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so like recently, you guys made, if for those that don't know, Cameron works over at Vercel in the on the GTM team. And you guys recently made like an agent that can kind of like qualify leads. Is that right? I'm
Yeah.
wondering like how you approached building that, and maybe like how you worked in some of these principles from the bitter lesson into like how you built it. I'm sure you use like the AI SDK and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely did. Yeah, there were a few things that we kind of some lessons that we had to learn that were related
Hmm.
to the bitter
Yeah.
lesson. One was if we started it as a very like deterministic workflow. So it was like, a lead comes in and we're just going to trigger all of these tasks. And in some ways it still kind of operates that way. Like it is kind of like it's just a durable execution workflow in the back end. But to be able to have like the agent side of it where it's like basically figure out if it's correct or not, if like the
Hmm.
qualification is correct or not, and then also be able to like know when enough research is good to be able to like, hand off to a salesperson. Those are all things I feel like we're continuing to kind of learn and approach, but yeah, that's such a good question. I'm trying to think of like a very specific thing that we had to experience.
Yeah. While you're thinking about that, it's like I think like it's pretty cool what Vercel is doing, and like I feel like I'm catching wind of it. I'm outside, obviously, but like the ability to quickly like iterate, obviously, like that's one of their things, iterate to greatness, but it's like with workflow and with AI SDK, like it's kind of the perfect combo to like test your system quickly. I feel like you can just kind of build, it's like for a while, even like I was using N8N quite a bit, which is awesome too. Like if you don't know how to code as much, to like kind of test like workflows quickly. Whereas like now with like use workflow dev, whatever you guys, however you say it really, but I don't know what the actual name is. But with workflow, it's like you can just like quickly spin up something, and then AI SDK, it's just like, and AI gateway too, if you're using Vercel infrastructure, it's like you can just quickly switch between and then write some quick evals to like kind of like measure that, and like it has closed like the loop of like AI system building, I feel like immensely, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, to be like a total shameless, plug for Vercel, like it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy how you can have like, just a handful of environment variables from Vercel and just have everything managed, which is super cool. It's
Yeah.
great for just like iteration velocity. I did think of one specific thing. I think the biggest thing that we kind of have run into is around prompting. And I think this probably happens. I think a lot of people have seen this with the bitter lesson with RAG, how like RAG, people will say RAG is dead.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of agree to an extent. I think that there's certain use cases for it that are necessary, like knowledge bases. And this is kind of one way that we're using it is like if you have just a mass amount of data in a search space, like maybe a vector database is the best thing for it. So, throw stuff into like a turbo puffer pinecone index and then be able to like search against it. And it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
But being able to like not necessarily encode into the prompting any bias of like what it should be looking for. And I think that that's something that kind of we have faced and are continuing to try to mitigate is like obviously you have to kind of point the prompt in a certain direction to be able to get it to qualify or dequalify a lead based off of like the company and business requirements. But at the same time, like if you give it too much guardrails, then it's going to like over index on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll like just go down one rabbit hole and just stay there. Or it'll say like, oh, I have enough information. I don't need to do more web searches, even though like might not. So I think that one example of like the bitter lesson for us is just being more confident in the model's inference ability rather than trying to give it too much instructions. I feel like the early days of the models, we were like, the performance was usually better if we gave it like super specific instructions, right? And this was like early, 2022, 2023, you would see like these crazy prompts online
Mm-hmm.
and people were like
Yeah.
selling prompts and whatnot. And it was like actually had value. I feel like now it's like you basically just give a model pretty good instructions and still like, test some evals with the prompts, make sure there's no regressions, but then just give access to everything to the model and just let the model just kind of cook.
Yeah.
Like give everything as like either grep tools or maybe like a deep search tool, knowledge base, whatever, and just kind of like let it go wild. And I feel like we've seen better results that way than trying to like say, if this, then do this in a prompt, because it's like really easy to want to do that as humans to just like tell a model like, hey, do this.
Yeah.
Um, I think like one thing that's been really funny to see, and I know that you've seen this too, like in some of our past gigs together, like we've faced this where people are like really nervous about AI taking responsibilities from them, like taking their jobs. But then
Yeah.
people get like super frustrated when AI can't do their job perfectly.
Yeah. That is
And
crazy.
it's
Yeah.
like this weird kind of conundrum. And it's always funny to me that like people will want AI to do something that's like a workflow is better suited for. It's like, oh, I want
Yeah.
an agent to do this, but it's like that's literally just like, a simple
Yeah.
workflow.
3 steps. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
then there's certain things where like someone might try to do a workflow where you do need an agent. And so I think it's just like we're finally seeing this emerge in models where we are understanding what a model's good at and what a model's not good at, and then we can kind of offload specific tasks to the workflow or to the model depending on like what it is. And again, maybe that's bad for the bidder lesson. Maybe we should be throwing it all in the model, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's the beauty and the downside of the bitter lesson. I think it's all merging. It's all
Yeah.
hindsight bias. Like it's
Hmm.
easy to know when we look back 2 years, like, oh, like I shouldn't have done this, but who knows? We don't know how these are going to progress. The only thing we know is that it probably will progress.
Yeah. And I think that that's like key is like, it's not necessarily that you can build like the perfect system now. Like you can't because things will change so quickly. But like building the system so that it can like be iterated on quickly. And I think like UI has given us like the greatest opportunity to do that now. Where it's like from like a UI perspective, instead of it being like in order to change the workflow of the user, you have to change the user interface. Now it's just like the user interface is either a chat, a like workflow trigger, basically,
Yeah,
something like that, and it's like you control then the whole entire like workflow or the chat and the tools that it has access to, so you can easily iterate while keeping the interface the same for the user, which is kind of like in the whole simplification of the UI that is happening across the board with AI.
that's true. Yeah, it's interesting too to see the convergence across just like engineering disciplines. Maybe it's we're kind of biased because we're more in the startup space, but I don't see as much this separation between front end and back end. And
Yeah.
maybe there
Hmm.
are in like bigger companies, like you're a front end engineer, you're a back end engineer, you're an AI engineer.
Yeah.
I think anything greenfield or like kind of building out new stuff, it's just like you are just now like it's just you're a software engineer and you have to do everything
Yeah.
because like yeah, they're so coupled now. And I think like you're saying with UI and things are getting simpler, but it's like, I think that building user interfaces for AI is like extremely difficult.
Hmm.
And also building like backends and like
For AI, yeah,
for
it's
AI
like
is like
very
also pretty
difficult.
difficult. And so it's
Yeah.
like people that are building anything greenfield just have to do it all, which maybe it's kind of always been that way, but it's just interesting to see those lines converge.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. And I think like I guess like to wrap up, I would kind of say like basically when building out these systems, right? It's like it's in one way it's become more complex because even like the AI thing you were just talking about, it's like a whole nother that could be a job in itself, back end,
Yeah.
front end, and an AI engineer. And it's like just when obviously like it's different situations for different people when it's just you and somebody else building a software like we do, or if it's even a smaller team, like it's a little easier to kind of like manhandle the system that you're building. But like as you build and as you're like thinking about implementing these things, I think it's important to like prioritize flexibility, and then like scalability is kind of like the biggest lessons from the bitter lesson. And so it's
Yeah.
like how do you do that? And it's I think it just requires like one to like kind of test it out and try it, and then two to like take the time to step back and like think about this new system. And like obviously, it's like 50 years from now there'll be books on this, there'll be a lot of insight about how to do this. But it's like we're living in a time where it's like next week, the next AI is going to be better than what we're using today. And so how do you do that? And I think it's just like prioritizing flexibility in your system.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think the biggest lesson for me is just kind of it's a little bit of like a humbling experience to just kind of let go of what I think I know and then try to rely more on like what the model is doing in some of these workflows. Um, because it's easy to want to like push the knowledge that we have and think that it's useful onto this process. But sometimes it's not, like, right, the AI can actually do the task better than us.
Yeah.
And that's usually what leads to the better outcome. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. And we'll see. Maybe we'll revisit this in a year and we'll probably be
I
all
know.
wrong, right? Because and we'll be able
I
to
know.
look back and see.
Yeah, I know. It is crazy how fast it's going. But awesome. Well, that was a good combo. We'll keep this going. So me and Cameron are gonna keep doing weekly episodes about, we kind of cross between marketing, AI, and design, with obviously like software engineering as the core concept.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.